A South Carolina veterinarian known for posting photos of herself with dogs and cats is now being featured in a mugshot. Authorities say she shot her estranged husband multiple times and killed him, and now she is charged with murder. We're going to dive into this case right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. All right, let's talk about Dr. Jennifer Ray. So she is this veterinarian in Aiken, South Carolina. She opened Hitchcock Animal Hospital several years ago. She had been married to Greg Ballman. This is a decorated U.S. Marine. He actually co-owned this vet clinic with his wife, but they ended up separating. And now she is accused of murdering Greg. Okay, so South Carolina police, they responded to this home where Ray was living, and they found Greg shot to death inside. And here's what we know based on police documents. So Greg Ballman, they say, was reportedly pronounced dead at 6:30 Sunday night this past weekend. He had been living apart from his estranged wife. It's unclear why he was at this home. An incident report that was filed by one of the responding deputies says, upon entry into the residence, I observed a white male who was later identified as Mr. Greg Ballman lying on the floor with gunshot wounds and a puddle of blood coming from his body. I observed a black handgun laying on the kitchen counter with the slide locked back. I also observed several shell casings throughout the kitchen floor. And then it goes on to say, while Deputy LaRocca was searching Miss Ray for weapons, Miss Ray made a statement stating he wasn't supposed to be here. Now, an arrest warrant charged her with malice aforethought, this type of murder, for allegedly shooting him multiple times in the back while he was laying on the floor. And for now, Ray is locked up in the Aiken County Jail while she waits a bond hearing with a circuit court judge. That's because she had her first hearing this week, but that judge apparently didn't have the authority to grant bond, so this is going to be decided at a later date. However, we did learn more about the situation from her attorney during that hearing. Reportedly, according to Ray's attorney, she was a victim of domestic violence that occurred on November 9th, and this allegedly was the same day that Ray had accepted separation documents from Greg. And Ray's attorney indicated to the court that Ray went to the hospital for treatment of injuries, that there are medical records to support this alleged incident of domestic violence. However, I will note, according to local news outlet WRDW, Ray's attorney told the court that no charges were filed against Greg with respect to this alleged domestic violence incident, and that Ray had reportedly requested authorities to hold off charging him because Greg was a Marine and she didn't want anything to affect his military career. By the way, little side note here, we actually used TruthFinder, this powerful background checker, to look up Jennifer Ray, and we put in her name and location. In just a few seconds, we were able to see some information about her, where she lived, where she worked. It doesn't appear she has any criminal history, but now, of course, she faces charges for killing her ex. But Law&Crime, we partner with TruthFinder. We use it to get details on people involved in our stories. But even if you don't work in true crime, it can be an excellent resource to give you some peace of mind. It's one of the largest public record search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription service, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. So if you're interested right now, you can get 50% off of your first month of confidential background reports. Just go to truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. Now, Ray's attorney told the judge that he's confident his client will get bond when the case goes before this next judge because she doesn't have a criminal history. She has strong ties to the area, meaning she won't be a flight risk, that she likely wouldn't pose a danger to anyone on the outside. And her defense attorney also said they plan to fight back against this claim that this was a murder. According to the Aiken County Detention Center website, Ray faces charges of murder and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. And going back to that vet clinic that Ray helped found, Hitchcock Animal Hospital, they provided their clients with an update online. In a statement, it says, our commitment to providing compassionate care for pets and their families remains unwavering, and we plan to resume regular operations. We still have 2 full-time doctors on our staff that intend to continue seeing patients during our business hours. We want to take this moment to reaffirm our mission of supporting both the animals we treat and the people who love them. While we cannot comment on individual circumstances, we stand for compassion, understanding, and kindness in all situations. Thank you for your patience and continued trust in us during this time. All right, so with all that in mind, I want to bring on South Carolina attorney Sarah Ford to make a little bit more sense of this. Sarah, thanks so much for coming here on Sidebar. A lot of moving parts in this case. What stands out to you?
Well, it's so unusual because They separated several months ago. Papers were served back in November, just a few weeks ago. And then the claim in the incident report that he wasn't supposed to be there. That's really triggering because you're wondering, were they discussing something? Did he come over? Why did he come over? What happened there? You know, issues of domestic violence, it's well known that after people separate, that is the most dangerous time for a couple. And then, of course, with what her lawyer said at the initial bond hearing, there's a lot more to this story, it sounds like.
To add a little bit more to that, according to WRDW, so the couple separated. This happened, I think, in August was when they first announced it, and then Greg had filed for official separation. And then he petitioned for support and maintenance from Ray, but not alimony or spousal support. And he requested a division of their assets and their debts, and he wanted the court to also prevent either of them from doing anything with respect to these assets while this is all being litigated. And he also wanted an order preventing either of them from engaging in what's known as adverse contact towards the other. But interestingly, according to WRDW, he didn't check off the domestic abuse box. So I thought that was interesting. You talked about what might have, I mean, this is a shocker, but what might have led up to this. Is there anything about that timeline as relayed by WRDW that, again, stands out to you about this?
Well, the NACO, or the no adverse contact, is generally a part of any sort of separate support and maintenance petition. So that's not surprising to me. What is surprising is that Dr. Ray did go to the hospital for these alleged injuries back on November 9th, but did not pursue any charges when she knew that she had been served with those divorce papers. So that is rather interesting. Now, of course,
separation.
Yeah, but, we certainly don't know what, went on before that and what certainly went on after that. But there's really not anything in that petition that stands out to me, particularly if now Dr. Ray is alleging that she had been the victim of domestic abuse throughout their marriage, as that seems to be what her defense is going to be.
Let's talk about that for a second. So I guess this is relevant to the idea of if the defense doesn't say, somebody else that shot Greg, but it was my client, but they're going to say she was legally justified to do so under South Carolina law, would the idea of her being a potential victim of domestic abuse, that would be a factor to consider in this case, right?
Well, I think it would be, and particularly that this was her home where she was. I mean, we do have a stand your ground law here in South Carolina, and I think that it would be a stand your ground hearing that would have to be handled before any trial. And they would basically put up their case that she was in her home, he was not supposed to be there, and that she had been the victim of domestic violence, was certainly defending herself based on prior instances of domestic violence, if that turns out to be the case. But it certainly would make for a very interesting stand your ground hearing, and would certainly bring some issues to the court whether they could pursue these charges of murder against her.
Can I go back to what that arrest warrant reportedly said, that she was charged with malice aforethought and that she allegedly shot him multiple times in the back while he was lying on the floor? That, and again, going back to something else, that there was several shell casings throughout the kitchen floor. That can complicate this analysis, right?
Well, it could, but in South Carolina, we don't have degrees of murder. You're charged with murder, you're charged with voluntary manslaughter. That's the extent of it. So I think that, based on what the officers, according to the incident reports and what's being reported, what they saw, it sounds like they charged appropriately. Now, whether there's any defense to that, whether this is perhaps a manslaughter case, that's something for the prosecutors to determine down the road. But certainly based on what law enforcement found when they went into the home, seeing Mr. Bauman in a pool of blood, it sounds like that was definitely the appropriate charge for the information they had at the time.
You think she'll make bond?
I think it's going to depend on how strong the evidence is that she was a victim of domestic violence. I think if they can show that she was defending herself in her own home, I think it's likely that she may be released with maybe GPS monitoring or something like that. But it really, really depends. I mean, for someone who's charged with murder, first time going up for a bond hearing in front of a circuit court judge here in South Carolina, I'd say it's pretty unusual for them to get bond. But it depends on how strong that evidence is that her legal team is able to provide. We'll just have to see. I don't know.
The veterinary clinic is really interesting in this, in the sense that again, based on reports, they had co-owned it. I imagine this must have been what could be or potentially could have been a significant issue in their separation. Don't know that for sure. But I would think, based on the statement, and I'll just go back to this for 1 second. There was a part of the statement that stood out to me. While we cannot comment on individual circumstances, we stand for compassion, understanding, and kindness in all situations. What role do you think that that clinic might play in the criminal prosecution? Do you think that that clinic is going to have some sort of evidence that will, be used at the trial, whether it's communications with people that work there, whether it's certain records? I just, find this an interesting aspect of the story.
Well, I always tend to go back to thinking that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men are going to be victims of domestic violence in their lifetime. And where do we spend the majority of our time? Most of us spend it working with our coworkers. Oftentimes our coworkers know more about us than perhaps our friends and immediate family members do. So there may be things that they saw. If there were ever any bruises, maybe, they had arguments or something in the parking lot at the office. There are lots of things that our coworkers can observe about us that maybe we don't even know that we're putting out there. So it would be interesting to see, what evidence that they may be able to contribute. And certainly what a terrible situation for them to be in, having to move forward while this is all developing. Just tragic.
What about the fact that he was a Marine? How does that affect this? Whether it's, again, if this idea of domestic violence becomes a real defense and they defend, her attorneys can put forward a defense that she was in fear for her life, versus he is a victim who was shot and was a United States Marine. You talk all the way down the line towards a trial. That can be difficult for a jury to accept that. And it really humanizes him in a significant way. A Marine shot down. But I also think it could be, this is a guy with training. Could he be a danger? I'm just thinking about that aspect of him being a U.S. Marine, how that may factor into this case.
I think we've got to wait on more information here, but I think you're exactly right, Jesse, is that, it could play either way, thinking that, this man has been killed, but he had training that certainly could possibly make him a danger to his wife or other people. But also, his wife was armed with obviously a deadly weapon that she completely unloaded. It's really going to depend on what the evidence shows, what the background is here, what neighbors, friends, family, and you never know what sort of evidence she may have or he may have. Our phones keep so much, what were their communications? What photos do they have that may support, either development here? And it's really too early to tell, but we certainly know that this gentleman is dead. Doesn't seem like there's any other possibility other than she's the one that killed him. But why and what brought them to that point? I guess we'll have to see.
And that's where I want to end with this, Sarah. What happens next? When will we know more information about what happened here?
We're going to have to see what happens at this next bond hearing. I imagine that this is going to be a pretty extensive bond hearing where her legal team is going to present a lot of evidence, a lot of information on their background, on their relationship, on what was going on, what precipitated their separation, the filing for the separation. We're going to have to see that evidence. And I think that they know that they've got to come out strong here at this bond hearing if they're going to move forward with this, domestic violence as the defense that she, was in fear for her life and had no option but to shoot.
Sarah Ford, thanks so much for coming on. I know we didn't have a ton of information to break down here, but we do have these bits and pieces, and obviously a lot of what we're saying is assuming and speculating, but we're just trying to see and previewing what we might expect in this case, but we'll see how it progresses. Sarah Ford, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jesse.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.